Today, I'm talking to you about something that is very close to my heart. I have been, as you know, I have been doing okay, so we're trying to get images done properly. A little bit of a problem in my office this morning, so I decided to use a background image so that at least you can see a good background instead of maybe a little clutter that is behind me at this time. So what I would like to do is to give you a quick run through what we're doing today. I intend to slides. I intend to show you a bit of me. Okay, as we get the slides done, what I'm going to do today is to start by telling you what I call my Benola story. It's not a complete, it's not that I'm trying to repeat everything that I've said before. I'm trying to talk from a new perspective. When I started Benola, one thing that I did was to go around everywhere and try to tell people about cerebral palsy. And so for maybe about 2.5 to 3 years, I took time to tell people about CP, what it was all about, and display my knowledge generally of the implications of CP, how it affects our lives, and so on. But as time went on, and as I started interacting with a lot of other parents, I got to understand CP better from their own perspective. I also got to understand from specialists who are being invited to present papers at Benola's events about, what cerebral palsy is, but also how it affects other conditions, physiological conditions. And so what am I saying? I got to understand about autism, about Down syndrome, about attention deficit disorder. At the end of the day, if one wants to talk about conditions, we'll be looking at well over 54 different names. That's why you hear of, funny names about child's conditions. And in understanding them, I got to realize that whether your child has CP or is just not doing well in school, etc., every parent has issues that they're dealing with. These issues are mainly because we are, as parents, have very high expectations of our children. We expect the best for them. And in getting the best for them, we usually go out of our way to see what we can do and how we can do these things. And so in telling us the story today, what I want to do is to start off with my story. So please bear with me when I tell you, when I share a few things about myself from when I was a child. As a young child, I'd say maybe about 5 or 6 years old, I remember having a cousin who had some form of disability Of course, at that time, nobody tells you what it is. All I can remember today is that he was malnourished. He cried all the time. And he was drooling. You know, there were issues that just didn't make me comfortable. And I'll tell you something which I probably never shared with a lot of people, is the fact that he had a name, which I'm not mentioning now, a Yoruba name, which my grandfather also decided to give me or had given me before. But when I saw this young man, it just made me detest that name until today. That name doesn't show up anywhere in my write-up because I just associated that name with this sickly young man who I must have died before he was 6 or 7 years old. But I can never forget that experience. As I started to go to school, I ran into children who had issues. That time, polio was a big thing. And a lot of kids with polio would come to school with metal braces on their feet. Some of them could actually walk with just those braces. Others had to have some improvised, poorly made crutches, which they used. And I remember a few of them who actually participated in football, which was, it was funny to look at time, but they were full of life. But most importantly, they were very, very brilliant in class. Then, you know, by the time I got to secondary school, my junior brother was going to St. Gregory's College. And at that time, of course, my parents were in Lagos. I was schooling in the north, but once I come home on holidays, he would come home with two of his friends who are vision impaired. And these guys were just too much. They were so free, they were so lively. And then they were even going to, there was a very nice cinema in Ikoyi that time called the Plaza Cinema. It was covered and so on. And they would be narrating how they would go to the cinema. My brother would be talking, and I wonder, how can you go to a movie with a vision impaired person? Well, it turned out that, you know, they followed the movie. They enjoyed all the scene. Maybe some friend is telling them a bit of what is going on and so on. And so you can see that even before I was 16 years old, I was already in awe of persons with disabilities because I had gotten to see what they could do. Then I joined the Air Force, and the Air Force sent me at some stage for a course in Germany. I think that must have been about 1980, 1987, 88. And I was living in a town that was about an hour's drive from the capital at that time of West Germany, Bonn, where the embassy was. And I used to go there to see some of the people, to just interact with Nigerians, like on a weekend or something. And they had this surface train where at the train stations, you actually climbed like about 4 or 5 steps onto a platform. And then you waited for the train, you got on board, and then so on. And I remember I was going, it was like about 18 stops to get to Bonn. And I saw this, you know, vision impaired young man at a station come on board in my wagon. He found his way to a seat, usually the seat for the disabled are just by the door. He sat down, took down, removed his backpack. Then his white cane, he folded it, I think it goes into about 5 parts. He folded it and put it in a bag. And then he sat. I was just listening. And the train also had, they announced the next stop. So after about 5 or 6 stops, there was an announcement of the next stop. And he removed his cane. He reversed everything he had done, took his backpack, put it on his back. He stood up, moved towards the door. And when the door opened, when the train stopped, there was this vision impaired young lady waiting on the platform. And they hugged themselves. And then she just hooked her hand under his hand and she led him away. Now, these are some of the things. I can also talk about times when I was in supermarkets and you see some vision impaired, I mean, some disabled person on a wheelchair, motorized wheelchair, or an elderly person moving around the shops, picking what they want, paying for it, and finding their way home, totally unaccompanied by anybody. All these things were there in my past. So by the time my wife get back to Olaoluwa, I was already comfortable with disability. Um, it wasn't such a difficult thing for us. Many people ask, how come you people are so open? Incidentally, my wife also took, I don't know how much disability experience she had when she was young, but she was also quite open with it. And we started to run with our case. Of course, we had our issue of acceptance, but down the line, I can tell you that it didn't take us a year to accept that our son had cerebral palsy, even as far back as 1996. And as time went on, we had a lot of experiences to travel. India, Germany, United Kingdom, uh, India. We've been to India more than about 4 times. One as I was on course, other times we had to just look for treatment or management, or so on. And then I, on my own, on courses, have been everywhere, because of the Air Force and because I was a pilot. And everywhere, what you notice is disability. And then in, I think it must have been around 1990, 2000 and maybe 2010, 10 or 11, when Nigeria had an Olympics, and I was in Namibia for some event. And there was this cocktail party we had one evening. As we finished, I went back to my room and put on the television, and there was this disabled Nigerian lady doing weightlifting. And she had just equaled, she was already in first position. She had just equaled the world record. And usually what they do, if you had enough trials left, they'll give you an opportunity to try again for a higher record. And this lady went back, her coach cheered her up, pumped her up a little with some motivational talk. Then she came back and she went for a world record lift. And she made it. Honestly, that blew my mind. Of course, when you come back to Nigeria, you look at the airport, Murtala Mohammed, the ramp or the thing that was supposed to lift a disabled person down has been broken for years. I see it every time I travel. I also thought about what government would do and so on and so forth. And it just didn't feel right. So I came back and I thought, look, maybe I should do something about disability. But luckily, when I met a friend of mine, a doctor, we talked about it, and he said, you cannot do disability generally. You need to do something that you are related with, you are connected to. And so he said, what's your child's condition? And I said, cerebral palsy. He said, then you should do CP. And I looked at him and laughed. I said, hey, my son is 16 years old. We've been dealing with this thing for 16 years. What else is there to say about CP? And he just smiled and said, Avian, go and Google it. And he said something very instructive. If you have a headache and you Google headache, you'll be looking for how to sort your problem, maybe the kind of headache you have. They say you have migraine, you will Google migraine and so on. But if with an open heart, you just Google headache, you will see all kinds of things. Frontal headache, back headache, this and that, headache caused by stress, headache caused by pressure, headache caused by hunger, and so on. And you will be shocked. And that's what I did. I opened Google, and in one night, I was shocked to see that there were, I won't say hundreds, but there were loads of CP organizations all over the world. There were, even on LinkedIn, there were groups and so on and so forth. And so I started to learn. And honestly, till today, I am still learning about CP. I'm still learning about the impact on parents, the impact on siblings, the impact of general society, and even how other people look at it. So this, in a nutshell, is my story and my experience with CP. Now, we all have our stories with CP. And as the topic of today's talk goes, which is owning your story, or owning and telling your story. The first part is that I think we should look at is owning your story. And we all know that acceptance is a very big problem when children are not meeting milestones initially. You see, unless a child is physically deformed, where there's a missing limb, there's all kinds of things that we can see with our own eyes, the impression is that in the Yoruba culture, you check for the nose, you check for the eye, you check for the mouth, you check for the 5 fingers or 10 fingers, you check for the 10 toes, and is voila, the child is okay. And you start celebrating. But with neurological disabilities, it comes on you slowly. And it is the symptoms are indicated when the child is not meeting milestones. With cerebral palsy, it can be a little more obvious in the sense that even feeding, that is suckling, which a baby is supposed to do naturally, is difficult because there's a deform, there's the throat is, or the tongue or the muscles around that place are affected, and the brain is also not sending the right signals to the muscles. So yes, we may notice cerebral palsy a little bit earlier than things like autism or learning disabilities and stuff like that. But when an expert is involved, and an expert can just be somebody who already has a child with cerebral palsy or who has been around children with cerebral palsy, they can see these small signs very early in the child. But even then, it is not a clear pronouncement. We need to get to the specialist, a neurologist, who would help us to do a scan and certain other things and confirm that, yes, there is a problem with the brain signals and so on. We also, from there, we would need to get some capacity building. So for us to acknowledge our situation, we need to be open to new ideas. When someone says, oh, your child is not doing well or doesn't seem to be okay, don't get upset. Ask what you mean. And then they may, if you're hostile, most people will just keep quiet. I mean, it's your problem. But if you're open, someone may suggest, oh, maybe you should go and see this person or the other. And from there, a doctor will make a pronouncement. The pronouncement is not really all. It just says there is this problem, your child has this, but how severe is it going to be? What are you going to go through? That's not a doctor's job. Doctor has maybe, God knows how many people outside waiting to see him. So even if he's willing to spend an hour with you, those who go see specialists, you'll see one woman, one matron, one nurse that keeps coming in and signaling their patients outside, which means, look, finish with this person and let's see the next person and so on. So there are people who are specialists at counseling, and most big hospitals like Lagos University Teaching Hospital, Lagos State University Teaching Hospital, and even some of our primary healthcare centers have, they have specialists. They have people who would be there to give you this counseling, to help you through these difficulties by giving you more time, and then maybe even send you to somewhere where you can get a neurologist or something to help out with what you're going through. Then you need to consider interacting with those who are ahead of you in the game. What do we mean by ahead of you in the game? Is the people who already have children, whose children are older, and who, by the grace of God, have accepted their situation and have moved on to the real management of their children. Now, what's the reality? Very simply put, the reality is that there's no cure. The condition of your child, and I like to use the condition because most people are still saying my child has a disease. If you care, please, after this talk, Google the word disease and you'll see the clear definition. Your child has a condition. There's a defect, there's a failure, which I like to refer to as an act of nature, where in the process of conception, maybe we took some wrong medication, maybe we exercised too much, maybe we didn't do certain things. So the development was negatively affected. And as a result, the child has this condition. The condition is not contagious, it is not infectious, it cannot be passed on, it is not hereditary. So it doesn't mean that another child will get it. It doesn't mean that he will pass it on to somebody else or something. Then the truth is that yes, there's no treatment except for what you can call comorbidities. Comorbidities are the things that happen. I'll tell you, like my son, when he was quite young, he used to drool a lot, lying on maybe a towel if you don't change it regularly. What will happen is that with AC or fan, he'll get pneumonia. So that's a comorbidity. Another one is that because his hands got stiff very early, he cannot swat a mosquito or something. Mosquitoes will feed on him and he will also have malaria. So he gets treated. And then sometimes there's what you can call infections, viral infections from maybe the food or something that got into his mouth. So you will continue to treat a lot of things. And even normal children, I mean, you notice they go to school, they play with their friends, they get caught, they catch measles or mumps and all those things. These are comorbidities. So, but management exists and it involves a lot of therapies, physio, speech, occupational, and so on and so forth. Now, how much therapy, how much management medication, it depends on the state of the child. And before I forget, CP comes in many colors. That's why we find some CP children can walk and some can write, some speak fairly well, and while some, even at old age, can only just mumble, stuff like that, while some are fully dependent. It's all different phases and different several phases. Then, you know, the expectations. These are things, again, that your specialist and particularly your counselor and therapist will tell you what is likely to happen down the line. They're not, nobody can be 100% accurate about what the future holds. And again, even if this future looks bad, if we begin to practice some therapies early, it is highly likely that the child will not be as bad as projected. So those are that. Then inclusion. Once we get through all the stage, we need to start to fully include the child in everything that we do in the home. If there are siblings, they need to understand very early what is happening and how they need to manage their child and so on. When visitors come to the house, the child should not be hidden. And that becomes an opportunity for you to share. Now, a problem which you know, talking about your child or letting people know about your child is that if you have not done the homework to understand the issues and build your capacity and so on, you'll find people referring to